Hey guys, Jason and Andrew here with the first ever Gauntlet video Q&A. So we've been at this for quite a while now, and even though we try to do our best to reply to all the comments, we thought it would be fun to address some very interesting questions in the form of a video. Just like the other big YouTubers, right Andrew?
Yep, we finally made it.
So yeah, we have a bunch of questions here which we found interesting, and we're very excited to share them with you. So the first question, Garabon asks, how did you guys first get started playing Duel Masters? What other games besides DM do you play?
So I think I started all the way back in 2007. So this is already when the TCG lifespan was kind of at the end of its release cycle. But this was still back in the day where they sold cards back in the store. So I remember there was a time where I bought this really cheap booster box. It's surprisingly cheap how Duel Masters booster packs are, or at least back in the day. Now it's insane. But yeah, so I got a box of base set for 36, this is New Zealand dollars. So it's a bit less even for if you try convert it back into US dollars. So $36 for 24 packs. So if you calculate that, it's probably almost $1 per pack, $1 USD per pack.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. and I remember, and sort of answering another part of the question, is Andrew and I actually played other card games competitively throughout the years. We played Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, and that booster box was Andrew's frame of reference for how much cards should cost. And so it's what do you mean it's $5 for a pack? No, yeah, that's too expensive.
$2 or $1.
Yeah. So what other games are you playing right now?
Actually not that much apart from DMP. I used to play a bit of Hearthstone, but I think that game is pretty rage-inducing. So I think Duel Masters is a lot better. There's a lot less RNG in Duel Masters.
Yeah, I'm also not playing too many games at the moment. Super Smash Bros. Melee for the Nintendo GameCube, but so I was pretty into that. Still sort of am. And then I also used to play a lot of Pokemon, the main series games, but less so these days.
So for the next question, Nitrox asks, I've known many DM content creators who switched to other games because the DM English audience isn't big enough to make a channel keep growing. So what keeps you motivated and what keeps you going?
I ask myself this every day. I guess a dream I didn't know I had until a few years ago was to get involved in content creation or filmmaking. I just really love watching videos. And I realized that not everyone is fortunate or talented enough to do these things for a living. So I figured with the Gauntlet, we have a niche, we have an audience, so it was an acceptable vehicle for getting started in that. And a while back I also had a creative vision for a bunch of TCG videos, which I mentally committed to completing. It hasn't been easy, but I also figure that given where people are in life and how quickly things are changing, I might as well push for all of us to finish it.
Yeah.
When it comes to tapping into the Japanese audience, I thought long and hard about trying to win them over. And that's, kind of why we started including Japanese search terms in the videos, but I don't think it will go past that because given the language barrier and, all of the Japanese-speaking content creators, it's just really difficult to compete. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, for me, I always kind of thought, for those of you who don't know, we kind of really initially started from our passion of Duel Masters, firstly, but also as a nice way to kind of keep in contact with each other. So for those of you who didn't know, Jason and I used to live in different countries. Well, Jason moved back to the Philippines, and I was still in New Zealand. And the Gauntlet was kind of just a way to really keep in touch with each other. We would, weekly go through, plans for videos, plans for decks. Yeah, and that was really, really cool.
Testing stupid Marino and the Dragon deck.
Yeah, exactly.
On Octagon.
Yeah. Yeah, so I see that continuing, regardless of how many viewers there are.
Yeah. DMP is very fun.
Yeah, DMP is also really fun. And it's really easy to do, even over the net.
Yeah.
So for the next question, Tyler asks, what are your thoughts on the idea of mixing Kaijuto and Duel Masters? Since the price of Duel Masters cards keep growing, he's interested in mixing the two games.
I think it's a great idea, but if you find that Duel Masters prices are a problem, my solution is to buy either Japanese cards or print proxies. I think what mixing Kaijuto brings to the table is adding more strategies rather than the affordability aspect. So you could treat Kaijuto cards as if they were sets, 13, 14, etc. of the TCG, and I think that's very exciting. I think there are some complications that you can run into, like fewer people being familiar with Kaijuto cards, or dealing with retrains and erratas, like Bronze Arm and Kaijuto costs 4, so it's like, how are you going to handle that? But yeah, once you standardize the rule set and how to handle those sorts of issues, I think it's a really cool idea.
Yeah, you just have to make sure that Revolverfish is Revolverfish and not Frogzuka.
Hashtag never forget.
Yeah. The next question, Bram asks, if a new civ would be introduced, what would be its characteristics?
I think it's hard because the original 5 civs already do an excellent job in interacting with every zone in the game, and then multi-civ addressed a lot of things as well. I think what they did with the OCG and in DMP was really good, where they stopped tying certain mechanics to civs, because, for example, every civ should have a form of draw, right? Not just water.
Yeah.
But to answer the question, like if you had a gun to my head, maybe a wind civilization, which focuses on interacting with the deck without straight up drawing, could be interesting.
Oh, wow.
So some effects you could have might be search your deck for a card and then shuffle a card from your hand back into the deck.
Oh, that's so cool.
So
it's like a wind.
+1.
Wind effect.
Yeah. Or, when summoned or when attacking, you can shuffle an opposing creature into the owner's deck.
Oh, yeah.
And then you balance that by putting like power or mana cost restrictions. Maybe like summon from deck and then shuffle something back, either the thing that summoned from deck or the creature that you summoned from the deck.
So kind of like the Grand Devils.
So maybe stuff like that could be interesting. Or a creature that searches for itself.
Yeah, that's definitely quite cool. I was thinking more on the lines of like, I think in the OCG there's also like no civ, which was pretty cool. Where I'm guessing, I'm not entirely sure if this is the case, but my imagining is that no civ would be like you can just play with any sort of mana source. And then, you know how on each Duel Masters card, like it's always worth 1 mana?
Yeah.
You know what would be cool if they had a card that's worth like 2 mana?
Oh, but it's like no civ, but it's 2 mana.
2 mana.
So you can't have, I guess you can't have a whole deck of no civ.
Yeah, so you can't like do it turn 1, for example, because you don't have any mana. Unless you have like other no civ cards.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
You have to find a really fine line of balancing those cards up.
Yeah, that's a neat idea. I never thought of that. For the next question, Bear Hunter asks, what are your ideas on card restrictions to bring new life to the meta?
Yeah, so I think this is a really good idea. We're already doing it. I think it adds a lot of diversity to the amount of viable decks. So yeah, it's definitely a plus.
And not only does it bring in diversity, but it can also help make the format more fun. Like some people think Soul Swap is super dirty, so maybe you could restrict that if you are very angry at the card.
Yeah.
Like I personally don't like Miraculous Snare, so we've restricted that to 1. I think Slash Charger also might be limit worthy in a 40 card format. But yeah, also, 40 cards, limiting the format to 40 cards is also another big change in terms of restrictions. But we're fans of the idea.
Yeah. We just want to see more cool decks.
For the next question, Stefan asks, have you thought anything about redesigning old, unusable DM 1-4 cards to make them shine in fresh new decks?
So I think this one I'm a bit kind of on the fence about. Like I said before, there is a fine line between, being overpowered and then also not good at all.
Yeah.
Which I guess that's the main problem with all card games is making sure that fine line isn't like crossed too much. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting thought because just for example, kind of the DMP changes that they made with the old TCG cards, like they gave Sky Terror additional 3k power and Double Breaker. I think those are definitely like healthy changes for the game. So maybe if you were thinking about redesigning some of those old DM 1 to 4 cards, you could start with the DMP changes. But then that's like a whole jumping down the rabbit hole itself. So,
yeah. For me, I haven't thought about redesigning old cards. I find that, one, well, we see enough play from the stables introduced in those sets, so it's not as if the sets have no representation. And I'm also not particularly attached to a lot of the unplayable bosses, which I assume this question is like leaning towards. When it comes to letting certain cards or concepts shine, I prefer the idea of increasing the card pool by adding support, like better angel commands for Alcadius, for example, Picari in DM Plays work wonders for it, or introducing a better option. So if you want humans to be strong, then instead of having to rely on Valdios, well, what if we just add Valborg to the card pool?
Yeah.
I think this method makes it easier for people to follow and replicate because the cards already exist.
Yeah.
Now moving on, the Black Shogun asks, which civilization do you think is the most powerful?
This one was pretty strange because when you first look at the question, the first thing that comes to mind is water, right? So, that just, you need cards to win the game, and water is the best source for draws.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at the civ distributions across all decks, I would say that water probably still comes out on top, but it's actually pretty close. It's much closer than you initially think. But I still think water probably is king when you need draw. The first thing that you come in mind is water.
Yeah, that's fair. In the early TCG and OCG, it's water hands down. But now I have to think about it some more.
Yeah.
I think based on what we've seen in how the OCG and DMP has evolved, I think mana ramp as a concept is just really insane. And especially even in the TCG, when you combine it with Soul Swap, it kind of makes up for the lack of draw, especially for some decks like the Forbos control deck. So on the basis of that and how nature is also present in the best aggro decks, it could be nature. So water or nature, in my opinion.
Just look at Fairy Life, right? Like that is going to be evergreen. For the next question, Jacob asks, if you were anime protagonists and didn't have a deck that made perfect sense and could just run off aesthetics, what would those decks be? What would your ace creature be? I'm guessing that Jason would like to see a Illusionary Merfolk in one of those decks.
I'm just going to assume for this question, Dreammates are off the table. Because that is a very protagonisty deck. So for me, in terms of TCG card pool, probably a Cyberlord deck. It could start off as mono water with Illusionary Merfolk as the ace card. And then as the seasons progress, I could toolbox it out and use like different spells and attackers.
That's so cool, yeah. Yeah, for me, I always thought the Survivor mechanic was really cool, and it kind of leads itself to like an anime protagonist. I actually remember from the anime that the even in this initial TCG, I wouldn't say TCG, but like the English dub of the anime, they had a character, I think his name was Dr. Root, where he was a pretty crazy guy. and he had like all these survivors that were like buffing each other with like crazy effects. It's definitely like very anime-esque.
You're supposed to be a protagonist here, Andrew.
Yeah, that's true. I think he was an antagonist. Jacob also asks, do you think the success of the Digimon TCG will lead to another worldwide release of Duel Masters, given its similar mechanics?
No, I don't think Digimon's success will translate into DM. I just feel like Duel Masters isn't as strong an IP outside of Japan as compared to Digimon. And there are already a handful of modern card games that borrowed some of the best mechanics DM pioneered. So, I don't know, I think it's kind of tough. There doesn't seem to be much reason, at least from what I'm seeing. But obviously I'm not a professional in that field, so there's something I could also be missing.
So continue on for that question, Jacob also asks, what aspects of DM do you think outshine these other games? And how do you counter arguments that dismiss DM as just a childish version of Magic?
I always maintain that DM's elegance lies in its simplicity. As you mentioned in your comment, the games and turns are short, and that's amazing to me. I love how the game is so considerate of my time. And also, the mechanics are simple, and I find that there's a lot of diversity, creativity, and depth to the game. I think these are all great. And I also think the combination of both Japanese and Western-inspired art style is super
that's
cool.
So cool.
With regard to MTG, I'll start by saying that thankfully I have not had to deal with those people. Since I don't like arguing, I would just ignore them and be like, yeah, it started as kiddie magic, but it's fun and I like it. And I also feel like if you can't convince someone that efficient gameplay is a good thing, then they are just committed to whatever opinion it is that they have.
Yeah.
When it comes to the game being distinct in its own right, I can see why people who only saw the global release might feel that way, but this is obviously not the case with OCG and DMP. So you could show them that, or you cannot. A bit of a boring response. Sorry if this isn't the answer you were looking for.
Yeah, for me, I think, like Jason said, DM is really, it's kind of the simplicity. It's kind of like elegant in that way, because you don't need like additional equipment like you need for Pokemon. You need a lot of dice. For Yu-Gi-Oh, you need like a calculator. Or now I think they even have like a app that you can choose, which is pretty cool.
Of course.
Yeah, but like you don't need any of those. All you need is your decks, and you can play.
Yeah. We even started out going first with paper, scissors, rock.
Yeah.
Don't need dice.
Yeah, don't need dice.
So, moving on to the next question. Jacob asked a lot of questions. He really wanted this video to happen, so shout-outs to you. What are ways we can better take care of our cards as they become more and more antique? A lot of older cards I come across have white trim damage along their borders, even when their owners say they had only lightly shuffled them. Do you keep yours in any kind of special conditions, like a room that never gets too humid?
So I'm probably not the best person to ask for this because the conditions of my cards are pretty terrible usually. But if I were to say, preserve a card, double sleeving is a good way to go, and then also investing in a folder. If you really want to preserve the card, you can consider encasing them, so using a service like PSA or similar.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Also make sure that you don't handle cards with oily or dirty hands. So either wash them, or I think in the comic book world, sometimes people use like gloves to like turn the pages so that the oil doesn't stick to the pages. Yeah. Also be very careful when sleeving them. Something that I noticed is when you sleeve a card and it's like a hardback sleeve, like a matte sleeve, sometimes the corner of the sleeve will catch the corner of the card and it will like chip it a little bit, and that's not a good time. So just be aware of that. Sleeve slowly. And yeah, I think there are a bunch of other really good resources online that talk about card care, so I'll leave links to those in the description. Now, when it comes to keeping the cards in special conditions, I don't do that just because I don't have the resources to do so. Yeah. But I think if you keep them in like sleeves and in boxes, especially in like airtight containers, maybe it should be fine. For the next question, Jacob again asks, how hard was it for you to come by certain expansions or decks as a kid? For me, it was extremely hard to find anything from the later sets in my area, and when they were out, the window was extremely narrow.
Yeah, I think this is pretty general for most people. The later sets were insanely hard to come by. And even when it was selling in stores, I think they just had like a short run with those sets. So the prices of those cards do, drastically go up. I'm not sure if you have any additional thoughts, Jason.
It's pretty much the same. I started Duel Masters in school a little later than you, so these cards would have been even more scarce when I was playing.
Yeah.
I do remember that our friends Kelvin and other Jason, who were in the Duel Masters Jeopardy video we did a while back, I remember when they were in middle school, they bought a bunch of DM10 packs on an online marketplace, Trade Me, and that was a huge deal. We had another friend, Robert, who had one Bombazar, just the one. But yeah, we really didn't see many cards from the last 3 sets when we were in school. Not. My only real exposure to playing with these cards came into adulthood when we started buying online, as of late from Japan.
And moving on to our last question from Jacob. He asks, what cards are on the verge of greatness? And what cards have art so amazing that you wish they had a viable effect to match?
I think these two questions are kind of like, they go hand in hand, so we lump them together. I would say that the Vortex Evolutions from DM12 deserve to be much better than they were in the TCG. And I think DM Plays is a pretty good indicator of what could have been had they been properly supported. I also think Alcadius could have been amazing if the TCG had better angel commands. And, you know, again, see DM Plays. And lastly, I wish the Destroy Shield when entering cards, like Core Crash Lizard and Gajira Butte, were a bit better. I think giving them a shield burn when attacking, or 6 mana 6k double breaker would have made a pretty big difference for them.
Yeah, those guys are, I find it so cool. And they're like kind of on the edge of being playable, right? You feel like given their effect that, you know, it's kind of like a Bomedius effect that they will be a lot better, but I think in concept, they just cost a bit too much.
Yeah. Especially since they only break 1 shield.
Yeah, exactly.
And moving on to the final question of the Q&A, the Black Shogun asks, what is your favorite card artwork?
This one's pretty easy for me. I always liked Fighter Duelfang. Just kind of his artwork kind of depicts him as this mafia boss. And considering he's from the Beastfolk tribe, it kind of fits.
Yeah.
So that kind of lends its name to the deck, which we call Beastfolk Mafia.
Of course.
Which is pretty funny because our list, our Bespoke or Neo Bespoke Mafia list actually doesn't even have Fighter Duel.
It's alright, we have Return of the King.
Yeah, we have Return of the King. So you got kicked from his own deck. But definitely back in the day, you know, I would play like 4 copies of them. So yeah, bonus points for nostalgia.
Nice. My favorite card artwork is Decloaz the Terminator. I think he just looks so cool. I love the energy effects surrounding his arms, how like one is purple, one is red. And the Spirit Quartz race in general is one I've always been intrigued by. You know, if only we could make a dedicated deck for the archetype. But anyway, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much to the people who submitted their questions. And I'm sorry this took so long, but better late than never, I suppose. As usual, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.